We're going to jump right over to Clint. Clint Malarchuk is, where's your intro at, Clint? There it is. A mental health advocate, professional speaker, suicide survivor, former professional hockey player, of course, as many of you probably know, and the author of A Matter of Inches and the Crazy Game. Clint?
Hey, Mark. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for joining me today.
That was you're welcome. My pleasure. I caught the last part of Timothy Caulfield. Very interesting guy.
Super interesting. And, I think it's such an important conversation in mental health in particular, where I feel like there's almost a disproportionate amount of bunk science in some ways, because we all just want to feel better. We all want to be happy. I think it's just this intrinsic need to feel happiness. So tell me about your own journey in that respect. For those people who don't know, why are you so interested and passionate about the mental health cause?
Well, I've struggled with mental illness, most of my life. As a kid, I was very anxious. I think I had undiagnosed OCD at the time. Later to be diagnosed, but that OCD, at least I was able to funnel it into, for most of the part, a good thing, because I was a repetitious guy. So work ethic was a big deal, and that got me to the NHL. I don't think I was overly skilled, but I had a great work ethic, and that OCD probably helped that. And with mental illness, sometimes I look at my own life. It goes up and down. Sometimes it would go almost like dormant and then come back huge. So I suffered a lot. And then in 1989, I suffered a horrific injury playing for the Buffalo Sabres. I severed my jugular vein accidentally, and a skate caught me. And I prepared for death. I really thought I was going to die. And I didn't know anything about trauma back then, but being predisposed to mental health issues, this trauma made everything really, really explode. And that's where my life really changed for the worst at that time. Now I'd like to just add, I am, like you stated, it led me, the injury, when I was 20 years of undiagnosed PTSD, and that led to a suicide attempt. And that's what finally got me, really well. I've had great years in between before that too, as well. But it was that suicide attempt that got me the therapy, the treatment, the medication, all the things that I really needed. And that's why it's so important, you know, about everybody talking and be open about your problems, because I can speak for myself. I suffered most of the time in darkness and silence because of the stigma. And so, I just urge people, don't do that. There's no shame in it. It's a sickness, and it's not a weakness. It's a chemical imbalance for me. And that's what diabetes is. It's a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
So, there's no shame. It's just a different organ, pancreas or the brain. I don't produce enough serotonin, and that's the happy chemical that our brain produces. So now I'm doing good. I'm that's why I'm an advocate. I'm grateful to be alive. I have almost died 3 times, and the last time was, an attempt. So, I feel God spared me for those that are still suffering. So that's why I'm passionate about, trying to get people to open up and get help, talk, get rid of the stigma. There's no shame in struggling. And, you know, with COVID and all these things, a lot of people aren't really mentally ill, but they're experiencing symptoms of mental illness, like depression or anxiety. We're getting laid off or losing a business, all these things that are happening in our world. And it's affecting people. So it's not really, they're not mentally ill, maybe, like I know I am, but they might not be. But there's emotional distress,
Yeah.
and they're maybe experiencing it pretty intensely, maybe for the first time in their lives.
Well, and we know that if left unchecked, then that becomes a risk factor down the road. We had Paula Allen on the show earlier from Morneau Chappelle, and she talked about this idea of the long tail, I think that I had called it, after the pandemic. So if we don't address this stuff early on, you experienced this too. As somebody who already had risk factors, you have this horrific accident that would have traumatized anybody, I think. But tell me a little bit about the culture of the NHL at that time, of being a man, opening up about your issue. Did any of that stuff play into your unwillingness early on to open up about your struggles?
Yeah, when everything went down, there was a Super Bowl. I was really struggling. It was after the injury, and I was starting to have nightmares and flashbacks, and I couldn't sleep because of the nightmares. And my OCD became so bad it was hard for me to leave the house to go to practice.
Mhm.
I was experiencing panic attacks, and at this Super Bowl party, it was at our captain's house, Pat LaFontaine, and I only stayed there about 20 minutes. And I can remember going back home, and I was on some painkillers for a broken thumb, and I read it: "Do not drink with alcohol; will make you drowsy." I hadn't slept in 10 days, so I'm sleep deprived, not thinking right. So I took a few extra of those painkillers. Not, I wasn't suicidal then, and then I drained a bottle of scotch because I wanted to sleep. Well, my heart stopped, and the reason I tell that story is because when I woke up in the hospital, a psychiatrist was asking me questions about what's going on. Was this a suicide attempt? What? So I told him exactly what I've been experiencing, and that was the first time in my life that I got diagnosed with mental illness. That obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, anxiety, and now I got undiagnosed PTSD from the incident. And there was a lot of hush hush around the. Well, first of all, the team doctor totally covered it up. Uh, it didn't make the papers. There was a lot of things that and why would they do that? Well, I guess to protect me, because the stigma of mental illness back then. Being a goalie, you're supposed to be really mentally tough, which has nothing to do with mental illness. But it was covered up pretty darn good. My players, my teammates knew that I was struggling with some issues. I missed about 2 months, and it was really not talked about at all. So we now with everything that Bell Let's Talk and everything that we're doing, and the NHL is very involved with mental illness now, or mental health, and so it's changed a lot since 1989.
And hopefully the good changes continue to come, especially as we have more conversations like this, and especially for people like you. I mean, writing books about your personal experiences and speaking publicly about your personal experiences. I think it really does make a difference. So I'm grateful to you for sharing your story.
Well, I wrote a book and I can barely read. How about that?
Anybody can do anything. I think you're
Right?
a great
Yeah.
example of
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much, Clint, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.